Hi, this is Roger Smith of the True Blue Lounge, and today I have a great guest for you, Miss Samuels. Miss Samuels was an educator at Mannings High School from 1977 to 1982. And without further ado, here is Miss Samuels. Hi, Miss Samuels. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great, great.
How are
S-
you? Are you all
I'm
right?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just trying to get over a little bit of a sinus infection, but I'm trying to put my big boy's trousers on and fight through it.
You and
So
me, I've got hay fever, and it's
okay.
been particularly bad today. So if I start sniffling, you will forgive me.
Yes, no problem at all. Glad that you're able to participate. So I like to have just a nice, light-hearted conversation, as though I met you in an airport or something like that. So there's no gotcha questions here, yeah. So Miss Samuels, tell us where you were born and what part of Jamaica you're from.
I was born in Kingston, and I grew up in Kingston. Went to school there. Went to University of the West Indies, and um, then taught for a number of years in Kingston, and then ended up teaching at Mannings.
So tell us. So let's slow down a little bit. So, what high school did you go to in Jamaica?
Immaculate Conception.
All right, that's supposed to be one of the great girls'
Y-
schools.
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
Oh wow.
Often known as often thought of as being an elitist school, but yes,
That, that's
that's
what
where I went.
that's where the polished ladies come from. Okay, okay.
Yes, we
All right.
even had elocution lessons,
Nice,
if you
nice.
can imagine that.
Yep. So you left Immaculate, then went to UWI. So tell me, what part of Kingston were you from?
uh, Off the Red Hills Road, near Red Hills,
Okay,
so near Meadowbrook, Red Hills. My family still has a home there, and in
okay.
fact, many students that I taught came to my house.
Okay, that's nice. I'm just trying to make sure that everyone knows you come from the hills and not the garrison, okay?
Well, the foothills, uptown,
Okay.
uptown.
Okay.
I'm an uptown top ranking girl.
Right. So tell me how you got from UWI to Mannings and how the interview process, who you spoke to, and your early days there.
Well, I had taught as an undergraduate. I Because Jamaica was desperate for teachers, so I got a job at Excelsior whilst I was still reading English at UWI. And I would leave in between classes, I'd drive down to Excelsior and teach some year 11s, fifth form as we knew it then. And then I got another job at Merle Grove School in their extension school. And I mentioned that because it's relevant to the Manning's job. When I graduated, I went to work at Woolmer's, and then I went on to work at back at to Excelsior as a full time teacher. And then I left Jamaica and moved to Trinidad, and then decided to come back in '77. And it was October, and I saw two ads in the paper. Most of the teaching jobs were gone. One was at Russell's, and one was at Manning's. And I rang Russell's, and the headmaster was in assembly. So I rang Manning's. And Mr. Neater spoke to me and he said, "Where have you taught?" When I told him the schools, and he said, "Oh, my friend is the principal of Pearl Grove." So he arranged an interview, and by the end of the day, I'd got a job. And a week later, well, about 4 days later, I went to Manning's and started on the following Monday. So it was October, sometime in October 1977.
Them times, what was the facilities like when you got to Mannings? What was that like?
You mean in the school?
Yeah, compared to some of these Kingston
Well,
schools that you were taught at.
yeah. I mean, was it a shock to me? The whole experience of coming to live in rural Jamaica was quite a culture shock for me because the school I went to was you know, it was affluent. The nuns had lots of connections with the US, so it was very well equipped in the science labs and so on. But as far as teaching at Mannings, we had the books. We had there was a bookshop there, and I just came in as a teacher, and everything was given to me to use to teach. Children bought their own books, unlike in the UK where we have to provide the textbooks and the exercise books and the paper and even the pens and pencils we provide here. Children had to buy their own there. I never gave it a thought because that's what I was used to. And so, I just settled in very quickly. The first day that my first teaching day, Alan Mumby, who many people will remember, and you obviously have interviewed him, he said, "Would you like to come for a drink with a group of us?" Now, I didn't realize that in rural Jamaica, it wasn't that commonplace that women drank. So when I said yes, maybe there was some surprise, but they took me down to the fort in at the end in Savlamar.
Yep, I know the fort. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I drank Red Stripes, so I was accepted.
That's
And
nice.
a friendship started there. So the settling in wasn't hard, really. I shared a house with some women. I had never ever lived away from home, except for the brief time in Trinidad. Um, but I lived in a house with some other teachers, Miss Reddy, um, Miss Donaldson, and they looked after me because Roger, I couldn't cook. I couldn't. I was quite useless actually. So I was fed and watered very well because Miss Reddy was a home economics teacher, so she
Right.
was a brilliant cook.
Right.
So for that year, I was happy, and then I moved into one of the flats
Okay.
and stayed there for the rest of the time.
Okay. So the flats were they was the facility at that time pretty good at the
Oh
flats?
yeah, when I moved in, they were only a year old.
Okay.
So only one person had lived in the one I was in, and it was very comfortable. We had a kitchen and a bathroom and a decent sitting area, and people were just so kind. All my neighbours along there. How many flats were there? One, two, three. There were six flats, and I had a teacher called Mr. Christian, who lived next door to me, and he was my savior because he fed me as well.
Wow, wow.
Um, and then there was another teacher called Mr. Bowman, and
I remember the names.
yeah, if I brought back food from Kingston when I went for a weekend, I would say, "Ellie, do you want to come and eat?" And he'd say, "Okay, I'll iron your skirts for you, your clothes for you," because he liked to iron. So, yes, and the children, the parents of the children, were also very kind to me. People sent food for me all the time. It sounds like I'm obsessed with food, but they did. There was a family called the Gales, and one of the girls, Charmaine, her mother, Mrs. Gale, used to send dinner round for me, and then they would send me fruit and veg. They sent me these bananas, green bananas. I had never peeled a green banana, so in my life, I didn't really know what to do with it. And the children would just come and say, "It's all right, Miss Summers, we'll do it." They
Right.
showed me what.
Right.
Um, so I had a really, a kind of wonderful experience of those years at Mannings.
That's nice. You
And
sound
last
sheltered.
night,
You sound sheltered.
well, it was just different. It was, yeah, quite sheltered. I think I don't think Kingston people know very much about. Well, I don't know if it's changed. I haven't lived there for 40 odd years, but I certainly didn't. We had odd trips to the country, as we'd say. We're going to the country. But we also had trips to. like Ocherius and Montego Bay, where you're just going to the beach and that kind of thing. But living in the place, living in a rural part of Jamaica, and Savlamar was a town, but it was still, compared to Kingston, fairly rural. Last night I was thinking about something um, that happened when I was there that I'll always remember. Um, at, at Christmas, when school ended, I would rush home to Kingston. But the children one year said, Miss Samuels, we want to take you to, they would do this Christmas, this walk where they would, I don't know if you ever experienced that. They'd leave early in the morning or right, it was dark in the night.
And
And
sing Christmas carols.
and no, they'd walk down the main street, uh, St. George's Street. And there'd be people selling stuff and right down to the market. So they said, just stay for a couple of days and we'll come and get you. So they picked me up. It seemed to be like at about 3:30, 4 in the morning. And they took me, we walked and it was cool and we walked down there. And it was just magical and a completely new experience for me. And I
Four
had
in
a
four in
wonderful
the
time.
morning.
Yeah, 4 or 5 in the, that sort of early morning time. And then you could buy things and the market was, all the people were selling Christmas stuff and things. And we just walked along and people sang and people ate stuff. And I went with a group of children and it was lovely.
That's nice. That's nice. It seems like the year that the kids, when I speak to Alan as well, the kids were very part of his life as well, if you know what I mean. They were, just really
Yeah,
good, genuine kids and stuff. You know,
yeah.
for some reason, I don't remember that sort of interaction with teachers when I was there somewhat, but maybe because I was in the lower classes and not, fourth and fifth, sixth form sort of thing. Cool, cool. So, as far as a job is concerned, was it, and compared to the other, was it a real nice job? Was it fulfilling? Did you always want to teach?
I always wanted, it's the only thing I ever really wanted to do. And um, I absolutely loved being at Mannings. I love teaching. I've enjoyed my entire teaching career.
Wow.
And as you know, I'm retired now. And it was children who made it, and I still maintain relationships with a lot of my past students from Mannings. Every now and again, somebody turns up in my life and said, "Did you used to teach at Excelsior? You taught me." I see things on Facebook, and somebody would say, "Are you Miss Samuels who taught at Excelsior? Are you Miss Samuels who taught Bulmer?" So, it goes back a long way. Of course, when I think about it, when I was teaching at Excelsior, I was only about 20.
Wow.
So these children were not that much younger because I was only teaching fourth and fifth form at Excelsior. So there's not a big age gap. When I came to Mannings, I had just turned 24.
Wow.
So really quite young, and whenever I go to Jamaica, I see a few Mannings people. They come to see me. So yes, I've always wanted to teach,
Okay.
and had a very good career.
So tell us about this all island trip that you guys went with Mr. Mumby. The picture I have, and I'll be putting it on the video. How did that trip come about, and how did you select the students to attend?
I had nothing to do with the planning of the trip. I think another teacher was supposed to go with Alan, another female teacher. And I don't know what happened, but he approached me and he said, "How would you feel about joining us on this trip?" Because somebody had dropped out. I don't know the details. And I was going abroad that summer, but not immediately. And I said, "Yeah, that would be fun." Because that's the other thing. I didn't really know the island. And he said it was a trip around the island. And so I went and we drove. We were in a bus, in a coach, and we were driving to Port Antonio for the first night. We're staying in schools for the most part, so we were going to stay at Titchfield, and on the trip, I mean, this would be unheard of in an English school. When we would have to have frequent stops because those coaches were not air conditioned. It's terribly hot.
Right.
And so we'd stop for them to get a cold drink and so on. And I remember I stayed on the coach, possibly reading, and a boy in the class came back onto the coach and he handed me an ice cold red stripe. And his name, and I wish I could remember his name, but he was known to everyone as Hoggy.
Okay.
I was so appreciative of that beer, and because it was so hot. Anyway, we got to Titchfield, got found where we were to sleep and that kind of thing. I mean, it really was literally camping in the classrooms.
Right. That must be uncomfortable.
Well, I can't imagine it would have been comfortable, but to be honest, that night I knew nothing because we went down to a restaurant. Alan had booked a restaurant on the beach. I was wearing jeans, and you remember those flares, those bell-bottom jeans?
Yep.
Or there was a grassy bit outside the restaurant before the water, before the sand. I must have inadvertent. Well, I don't know. We were sat in the restaurant. I felt something crawling up my trousers, and I thought, "Oh, it's a lizard. Oh God!" And I said, "Alan, there's something going up my trousers, my jeans." And he said, "You can't take this woman anywhere." And then, so I thought I better just grab it through the fabric. But as I grabbed, it it bit me. Well, I don't know if lizards bite. I have no idea. But I absolutely dragged the jeans off. I just stood up, and I just pulled them off, and there was blood on my leg, and I still have marks on the leg from that.
Wow.
And 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 some men in there shouted out 40 leg, 40 leg, and somebody came with a machete, and it was like an 8-inch one. And I said to Alan, says, Gay, we're going to have to get you to hospital. And I said, am I going to die? And he said, no, but you'll need antihistamines. And I could feel this kind of coldness going up my legs. But they brought my dinner out, and it was a huge fish. And I said, well, while we sort out the children, because of course you have to sort out the children so that then he'd take me to the hospital. Um, I ate a few pieces of the fish, and they took me to the hospital. And I was seen immediately, and they injected me with antihistamine, I guess.
Hmm.
But they said that I wouldn't be well that night, and I wasn't. And the group, they absolutely looked after. I was delirious apparently, and just writhing in pain. And the children looked after me that night.
Wow.
So thereafter, we're friends, and for a couple of years after that at school, kids who had been on that trip, they would touch my skirt or say, Miss Summers, 40 leg. And I'd say, it's all right, I'm not dragging off my clothes. And the thing about it is, there I was, undressed really, but they were so respectful.
Hmm.
I have, I did put the jeans to go to the hospital,
Right.
and and the next day I was very drained. But the rest of the trip was lovely, and then we went, we did other things. We went to Ocho Rios, we went to Montego Bay, and we had a great time. And then we went to Negril, and then
Hmm.
back to Sam.
Okay. Nice. Nice. So, was there any difficult times at Mannings, or you just, basically enjoyed that stint in your life?
Well, there was some stuff going on, political stuff, but it didn't impinge on me terribly.
Okay. Hmm.
It was just a good time in my life.
Hmm.
I mean, some poor girls there. This Charmaine Gale, who everybody called Chups, she and another girl called Karen Kuzi decided it was imperative that I learn to play tennis because I'm not sporty. I have no interest in sport.
Hmm.
So for a term, every like 3 times a week, they'd come and say, "Come on, Miss Summers, we're teaching." I was so hopeless, and they were so valiant. They took me to the tennis courts. You know, this school had tennis courts,
Yes, yes. Hmm.
and then Karen would say, "Miss Samuels, you have to go after the ball when it goes to your left. You have," and I'd say, "No, no, no, I don't go to the left, Karen. I only go to the right." And I never understood the rules, and I never learned to play tennis. So eventually, they abandoned me.
Wow, wow.
Not
Okay.
no, they abandoned heavens. But oh, there is one thing I want to say about when Alan left and came back to England. Um, Jamaica was going through a terrible time financially, I think, the finances of the country. And books that we had ordered from England hadn't arrived for my A level class. And the exam was coming up and we hadn't read the book or anything. And I rang Alan and said, "Please, can you buy the books and send them?" It may have been 6 or 8 students, so he did. And I spoke to Mr. Nita, and I had to teach a big thick book, that book, like in a week. And the children's families were great. They allowed them to come to my flat, and it's a small flat. And they would stay till the early hours of the morning while I taught them because we'd have to work at school in the day and then carry on, in the evening and late in the night. And so, it was, and that's the kind of place it was where people found solutions.
Wow, wow. So after Mannings, tell us how you got from Mannings to be on that comfortable couch that you're on.
Right. Well, I was still at Mannings, but I applied for a teacher exchange, a Commonwealth teacher exchange, and I had been to England before, and I'd been to see Alan after he came back to England, and one of the places that I came to was Birmingham, and so when I applied for the teacher exchange, hello,
Yeah, I can hear you.
oh, because I stopped seeing you,
Okay.
um, yes, so they I put that down as a place that I wanted the exchange to be. And I was lucky enough that a woman here had put had applied. So I came to her job, lived in her house, had her car. She came to Mannings, lived in my flat, had my car, and we I spent the year. She spent the year. She ended up being getting she you in those in those exchanges you ask your friends to look after the person who's come and include them in their lives. And Mr. Christian, who lived next door to me, was very kind and did. He was my good friend. We still are friends, and he ended up marrying the lady who went to Jamaica.
Oh, he did he?
Yeah, yeah, they're divorced now, but they have 2 daughters, and when my children call him Uncle Chris, and they grew up with their children. So, and then I came back to Jamaica when the exchange was over, but I'd met my husband and we'd got married, and he came back. He came to Jamaica, and we lived there for well the term that I was there, and then left Mannings, went into Kingston, stayed a couple of months, and then came back to the UK.
Okay. All right. So, so how long have you now been back in the UK?
83 till so
Okay.
42 years.
Okay. 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 And what have you been doing with yourself in Birmingham?
Well, I got it. Well, for about 5 years, I did not want to teach because I didn't really enjoy the teaching experience in the first in that exchange year. So I ended up getting a job in social work, working with the recovering mentally ill for about well, I remember exactly 4 years and 11 months. Because
Wow.
and then I went back into teaching, and I ended up teaching at the school where Alan had left to come to Jamaica. So we
Okay.
kind of followed her around. and I taught there for 24 years.
Wow, that's a long time. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
cool, cool,
And
cool,
then
cool.
after I taught, sorry, after I finished, I got very involved with the teaching union. So when I had finished when I retired, I carried on working part time as a representative, a union rep, work supporting teachers, representing teachers. And I did that till I was 65, and then I haven't worked since then.
Okay, so what students do you still keep in contact with, if you don't mind me asking? I'm just trying to see if you remember the names and stuff.
Yasmin, Curlew, Charmaine Crowell, Thornia Beckford, Angela Louise, Karen Cousy, Leighton Khan, uh, many on Facebook.
Okay,
Somebody who I didn't teach, Andrea Henry.
okay.
Uh, through through Facebook, I am in touch with some of them, but I
Andrea
see
Henry's class of '82, so I know her.
right. But she communicates with me, but she says I never actually taught her, but I remember her face and seeing her around school, and yeah, and many more.
All right, so we're gonna get to the fun part where I find out a little bit about you. So, are you religious, and does religion help you in your life, Miss Samuels?
No, I was brought up a Catholic. Immaculate is a Catholic school, but I left the church when I was in second form, at the end of second form, and I've never looked back. No, I'm not at all religious.
Okay, cool, cool. And do you want to be? Sorry, go ahead. I
I,
interrupted.
if my mother was visiting me when she used to visit me, um, I, occasionally I'd go to mass with her, particularly like Christmas Eve and so on, which means something to her. But no, and you grew up in the UK in part. It's a very secular society. It's not been an issue. No, but I read anything to do with the Catholic Church or things that happen in church, or I would watch the stuff to do with the election of a new pope. But no, and I read religious stuff. I'm very interested in the religions. I taught RE actually at my last school, and I was very happy to teach RE, but I treat it as a subject.
Right, right, right. Would you do you want to be buried or cremated?
Always cremated since I was a small child.
Okay, okay.
And
Uh,
at that time, the Catholic Church didn't allow it. But I'd read a story about a person being buried alive, and it absolutely freaked me out. And I just thought, no, no, no. When that flame hits you, whether you're dead or not, you will be dead.
yeah, yeah.
So, you know, um,
What do you think
so
happens
no,
to? Go ahead.
cremated.
Right. What do you think happens to us when we pass?
No, so I have no idea, and I don't really care.
Right.
Um, I read something recently, or I heard somebody say, before you were born, you don't know where you were.
Yep.
And
True.
yet, a baby is born and they come straight away, I think, with a personality and what people might want to call a soul. Uh, it's very hard for little children. My grandchildren say when they look at photographs with their parents or us, they say, I remember my granddaughter saying, "Grandma, where was me?" And I said, "Well, Daddy, you weren't here." She's got a new response there. "Oh, I was in Mummy's tummy." She
Right.
wasn't, but she.
Right.
I just think maybe when we're dead, that's where we are. I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
Not bothered.
It's nice that we think about these things because at the end of the day, no one's come back and told us anything. So I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah,
When you think of the future, are you hopeful?
I have to be in a sense because I've got grandchildren. I've got children. I worry a lot. I've got two sons. One son has three children.
Okay.
I kind of don't know what sort of world they're going to inhabit.
Mm-hmm.
Already, their world is very different from mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I'm a glass half full person.
Right.
I'm I'm an optimist. I am not. I can't afford not to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Especially with having grandchildren as well. They're looking at
Yes,
grandma and they're thinking,
and my life experience is that so many people are good and kind.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not
That's good.
happy about politics. I'm
Right.
not. I mean, very, very politically interested, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not happy with the state the world is in.
Right.
I'm not happy about lots of things,
Mm-hmm.
and the lies that we're told by, gosh, so many, and the things that are withheld.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of your own world,
Mm-hmm.
of people that you know and your family and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I am optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any hobbies?
I, having told you that I couldn't cook,
Okay.
when we got married, my husband did all the cooking
Mm-hmm.
because I really couldn't cook. But he was a vegetarian and I am a committed carnivore.
Mm-hmm.
So I started phoning my mother and saying, Mummy, how do you do this? How do you do that? And now I absolutely, and all through my teaching, the thing I cook every single day
Wow.
because I just love to cook. So I'm not saying it's a hobby because we eat, you have to eat, but I enjoy the process.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing I do is read. You can't see this room, the wall lamp, it's full of books. I read several hours every day. It's my
Wow.
main hobby.
Mm-hmm.
We walk. We like the garden.
Mm-hmm.
We like. I like to go to museums and galleries and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't like cities anymore. So I I don't like crowds. I
Right.
don't like
Right.
to be crowds of people. I haven't been into Birmingham city centre for over 8 years. So, it's only 6 miles away, but I just haven't gone. So,
So you haven't been to the
reading,
bull ring in a while, then, yeah?
eh?
You haven't been to the bull ring in a while.
Oh gosh, no, not. I would say even longer that I used to go into the city centre because my work with the union involved meetings in the city centre. The Bull Ring is a place I absolutely loathe.
I remember going
No,
there
no,
a
no,
lot. Okay.
no.
Okay.
No, I haven't been.
So so when you cook now, what is your go-to dish that you like preparing for yourself and eating yourself?
There's no go-to dish. Different things every day.
Okay. Okay.
I
I
like to cook. I cook Thai food. I cook Indian food. I cook Jamaican food. I cook Italian. I don't use recipes. I cook from taste.
what do you
And
call Jamaican food, if you don't mind me asking?
well, I mean I don't. I've never followed the even when the children are at home. I don't do the Sunday lunch of rice and peas and chicken and stuff.
Uh-huh.
But now that my boys have left home, if they were to come home on a Sunday, um, I would do rice and peas and roast beef. I like Christmas dinner is rice and peas, roast beef,
Nice.
turkey. It's a marriage of the two cultures: roast
Okay.
potatoes, um, uh, turkey. Well, my family in Kingston always had turkey at Christmas, but they also had beef. We never ate pork, so there was never any pork. But now I cook ham,
Okay.
and so you know, if the boys are coming, I do stuff that they don't necessarily cook in their own homes. My younger son, he cooks oxtail.
Nice.
I buy it and he cooks it. He's a very good cook.
Okay.
Uh, my sons are like one is 38, one is 34. So they're grown men and they have their own lives and so on. but I see them often, and I, I guess I cook a lot of Italian. I cook a lot of Thai.
I suppose you're making up for not cooking when you were at Mannings them time there.
I know.
Right.
I no. Well, I just thought because cooking interfered with my reading and my life,
Right,
and
right.
you have to, Jamaican cooking is quite time consuming, especially in those days. I mean, you know, you'd see on a Saturday, a lot across the land, you'd hear the grating of coconut
Yes,
for the
yes.
rice and peas. Well, nobody has to do that. I don't know if people still do it at home, but
Yeah, they do, they do. In Jamaica,
yeah,
they do
but you can use coconut. You
milk.
buy, yeah, or powder or whatever.
Right, right, right.
Um, yeah, and I'm a pretty decent cook. What I don't do is bake. I
Okay.
don't bake. I don't make. I love sweet potato pudding, but uh, that's something I'd have to buy
Right.
because you know.
What about drinks? If you go somewhere nice, what is your drink of choice? And I'm talking about alcoholic beverage now.
Always gin and tonic from when I was a girl in Kingston. Gin and tonic.
Okay. So the gin you
Um,
have now, what make of gin do you have now? Or
well,
is,
there are
is your
so
go-to?
many, but my go-to gin used to be Tanqueray, but I
Tanqueray. Okay.
try all the other gins now.
Uh-huh.
I drink. I can't drink white wine, but I can drink prosecco, champagne, and cava. Can
Okay.
drink the sparkling ones.
Okay.
So it depends. I like, and I drink. I don't like heavy beers. I don't like ales, but I drink lagers.
So you like
So
a lot of the posh stuff, don't you?
do I? I have no idea.
Well, when
What
you
else?
said cava and prosecco, and you like the bubbles, so I can imagine you have some nice crystal flutes at home that you sip out of.
Well, I, I do, but I also have. Do you remember the ones that baby sham? The ones that were you're younger than me, but in the 1950s, it was the champagne things that looked shaped like that, sort of like a flute,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember them. My
like
parents used to have them. Uh-huh.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I have bought those, and that's what I prefer to use.
Okay, okay. Well, don't make sure you don't break any of them because I can't imagine going to you being able to replace them anytime soon in
Oh no,
England.
no, you can get those now
Okay.
because more and more they're realizing that wines that have bubbles, they should be in a wider thing rather than a flute.
Right, I see.
So so anyway,
I
yeah,
don't
we
I
will
don't do
we
gin. I don't do gin because gin and vodka have no taste to me. There's something about it. So I
yeah.
end up overindulging because there's no bite. I like things like white rum because you get punished immediately, if you know what
No,
I
I
mean.
don't like white rum, but I will have mojitos. I will have rum cocktails,
Cool,
but
cool.
not and that's only in recent years. I never used to have rum punch. Gin was always a drink that I liked.
Okay, okay. So, thanks for taking the time and talking to me, Miss Samuels. What I'd like to ask you is there anything you'd like to say to the kids that you taught, or anyone that's trying to reach out to you, or just hopefully they'll just see this.
Well, I would say the children that I taught at Mannings, who are now all old people like you, Roger, older than you,
Yep,
and
yep, yep.
they taught me to teach. And they me my it was 5 years at Mannings, but 4 years living in Savlamar. That that really made me understand Jamaica in a way that I probably never would have done had I just stayed in Kingston or gone abroad. Because they the level of generosity that of spirit that those young people had towards this useless kind of Kingston girl who had some authority over them because she was a teacher was just amazing. Um, are you there?
Yeah, yeah, I'm here. I'm just wondering. You're there talking. And I was thinking, wow, cognitively, Miss Samuels is sharp. I'm just wondering what you were like as a teacher in
Well,
the
I'll
late
tell you,
'70s.
Yasmin Curlew said to me once, after we re-established contact, she said that some things I'd said to them in the class absolutely just stayed with her for her whole life. And one of the things, apparently, I must have been asking a question in class, and they just sat there looking at me, and I said, "Don't sit there like bumps on a log." And she loved the expression. So years, and it made me laugh. And you don't realize as a teacher, it isn't now till now that I'm much older and long retired, that I realize the impact of what you actually say to children. For you it might be just a throwaway line,
Right.
but you're their teacher, and for them it has some resonance. Either
Gravity.
they like it or they hate it. But she liked it. So we were at a National Trust property a few years ago, and I was sat on a tree had fallen, and they'd made a seat of the log, and I sat there, and I said to my husband, "Take a picture of me. I'm sending it to Yasmin." And I sent it, and I said, "Bump on a log," and she just, she laughed.
She obviously laughed.
Um, I was very. There was a boy called Trevor Dawes, and he lives in New York. He's the same sort of age as that class. He was on. Was Trevor? No, he'd left. Maybe he'd left. No, he was in the class. That trip around the island. He was in Alan's class, and he and I had a big argument in class because he said women weren't as capable and blah blah as men, and I've been a feminist since I was young. So so I must have really had a go at him. And he had to leave Jamaica, who he'd been raised by his grandmother, maybe, and he went to New York. And some years later, he wrote to me and he said, "I was wrong, you were right." But when I look back at how I was opinionated and imposing my opinions on those young people, as I developed as a teacher, you realize that was my youth and my lack of wisdom and exposure as well that made me do it like that. I became much more effective as the years went on.
Right.
And
Right.
then when you become a parent, you sort of know that, oh, there are different ways of handling things. 'Cause I used to get so annoyed with them. Um, Coming to England and teaching for that year, teachers in England shout, and Jamaican teachers never really had to shout because the children were really good and respectful. But you get into a habit here. And when I got back, I raised my voice a few times in class. And the children, they were good. They said, "Miss Samuels, why are you shouting at us?" And it really made me like, stop, stop. You're
Right.
not
Right.
in England. These are children who are not used to being spoken to like that. I quickly adjusted. So they taught me a great deal. And I shall always remember that time in
That's
my life
nice.
with a great and the friendships I formed, as we've mentioned, John Revel. John is my dear, dear friend, and we speak regularly. I see him. John's 86 now. Many of you, the people that you will show this to, will remember John Revel. He taught geography and economics to A level, and then switched and he became the librarian, and he was housed in that building that they're trying to, the old building
Yeah.
that they're raising money to redo it. John was housed there, and John was a very, very well thought of teacher.
Wow.
You know, so
No, that's nice.
yeah, it was a
That's
good
really nice.
time.
Cool, cool. Well, once again, Miss Samuels, I'm really appreciative that you were able to take some time out of your reading and your cooking to have a chat with me and reminisce a little bit about Mannings. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're very, very welcome, Roger, and do keep in touch. And let me see how things work out for you with all these. What are you calling these? Are they? What are
I
they?
they're my podcast. I call it the True Blue Lounge, and
Yeah.
I just try and have relaxing conversations with people. You know, I'm not trying to be Don Lemon or any of these great presenters. I just want to be the ragamuffin Joe Rogan. You know, just having a nice time with a
Well,
rum.
you're not a ragamuffin at all. I was really shocked when you told me that you didn't like English and you didn't do well in it. I thought, gosh, really?
Yeah. Well, I think some students or some personalities at an early age, this arts and science thing kind of is more apparent than it is for others. So for me, in a very early age, I was just very maths minded, and I just knew
Yeah.
history, literature, reading, and I think maybe it could be a spectrum thing. Who knows? You know.
And yet, Roger, look at what you're doing. You're doing something where you're using words.
Yeah, well, yeah,
And
yeah,
you're using words
yeah.
effectively. So, thankfully, the whole school system has changed. That absolute divide between maths, science, and arts has changed. Many of my student teachers who I've trained over the years were their first subject might have been English, but their second subjects were something like PE or maths or science even. And
Right.
initially, I really? You're doing an English. You've done an English degree, and you've taken your secondary subject to teach as a science which seems diametrically opposed. So it's changed a lot, you know. But thank you
Yeah,
for the opportunity.
not a problem at all. Anytime, anytime. And love to have you back with some of the students one day.
That would be great.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Take care.